Nice. You have a chair? You want to grab? Do we have a chair for this young man?
Let's sit on the stairs.
Or there's some chairs, whatever you like.
No, don't sit on the stairs because you're going to be in the frame for the shot.
It's okay. Could be on the frame. In the other room. All right, footnote day. Let's see if we can jump into this baby. So, we're looking at chapter, page 99, Os Zayin, inside. Come on in.
Well, there's a lot of footnotes.
And it's a whole footnote.
Footnotes on the footnotes.
There's footnotes on the footnotes. That is true. You with me there? Should I keep going?
Yeah, we're live.
We're live. So, just so we're not randomly in a footnote, in chapter 7, we start talking about the finale of this thing is the idea of the advantage of Chassidus, if you remember, over Nigla. And then we started to go into this idea of right? That you should spread the well springs outward. So we learned many lessons about that, but while the Rebbe mentions the idea of spreading the well springs, he brings out a point, which is why is it that the Baal Shem Tov, who had this meeting with none other than Melech HaMashiach himself, what did I do?
You're good, keep going.
He had a meeting with Melech HaMashiach, right? It's the first Torah. It is the first Torah in Keser Shem Tov, right? Where it says, you open up the first page, the letter from Gershon Kitover. Why was he called Kitover? Because he was from Kitov. Kitov is actually happens to be where my whole family comes from. Oh, wow. My grandfather, at 13 years old, escaped by himself, and the entire town was destroyed in a day. Kitov. And Gershom of Kitover was the Baal Shem Tov's brother-in-law, and for a period of time he lived there, and they became close, and he wrote him different letters, and the letter that we know, the Baal Shem Tov went on this journey in his soul to go meet Mashiach, was a letter to this Gershom Kitover. And in it, he says, when are you coming? When's Mashiach coming? And he says, when your teachings will spread forth to the outside. But he calls the teachings the well springs. And this is not a small fact. So the fact that the Rebbe just brings this, that it's called the well springs, he spends 2 full pages of notes trying to explain why is Chassidus called by the name well springs. It's not just accidentally, it's not like a cute phrase, Mashiach was just, being flowery. The whole secret of the Temimei Torah is called by well springs. Well springs have certain laws and dinim and so forth, so let's get into it a little bit. First of all, he also says at the very top of the left column, we're going to start on the left column, it's almost all footnotes, and he says there, after a few other things, that ein lacha kates megula mizeh, right? There's something called a kates. Different rabbis throughout the generations said there's a kates, like we're going to know the end of Mashiach, and it's this date or that date. He said there's no greater, more revealed, like the end of days sign than what Mashiach himself told the Baal Shem Tov, which is that's the case. When you're going to see, when the well springs are spread to every outside place, that's the sign. Fine.
That's the end.
That's it. So, second line down, footnote world. Hatam. You see that where it says Hatam? No. Second column.
What number?
No, it's just.
It's on 34. It doesn't have a number.
It's we're in the middle of 34. Just start there because it's the rest of it is like.
In the first selection.
Referring us to different random places. Hatam. Everyone sees Hatam? Parrots? That's your first problem right there. You gotta read inside. Who's got one? Hatam Masha Kina Melech HaMashiach LaTorah Baal Shem Tov B'Shem Mayanos. What is the reason why Mashiach called the Baal Shem Tovs with Torah, which is Chassidus, by the name of well springs? Yesh Lomar. Here's the reason. One of the main definitions of a wellspring is that its waters are joined to it. Meaning to say that if you, in the parentheses, he goes on to say, in the Mishnayos of Mikvos, he says, Haviru agabe brecha v'avsiku hu kamikva. If you take water of a well, mayan, of a spring, wellspring, and then you flow it into an empty pit, and that same water stops being connected to the mayan, it no longer has the din of a mayan. It's not spring water anymore. It's now called mikveh water. So the thing that makes it a mayan is its connection to the actual well itself. V'lo od el shemeimav kashem besoch hamayan yesh lo mashem metzius hamayan atzmo. He goes into this whole thing here. He says that the waters, when they're still inside of a mayan, let's say you have like a mayan and there's sort of bubbling over, there's water in the midst of this spring, he says these waters are not called water. The waters themselves are called the mayan, right? So there's water from the spring, and there's the spring itself. When the water is still in the spring, it's not called water. As we're going to soon see in a second, there's like laws that govern this. It's actually called the mayan itself. Based on this, we can understand this kind of really weird and interesting opinion of Tosafos, which you're going to see his opinion of well water. And he holds Shemayan mitahir davke bezochlin v'lo ba'ashboran. He holds that in fact the wellspring water only purifies when it goes outside of the wellspring. In other words, when it like sort of crawls across the ground coming out of the spring, and not when it's collected inside of the spring. That wellspring water, it purifies as it exits, not when it's collected in the spring. Even though it's obvious to Tosafos, even though those very spring waters, if they would go and collect themselves in another pool nearby and even get cut off from the wellspring, they purify, right?
They do?
They purify, not as a wellspring, as a mikveh. Yeah, they're pure waters, but why those same waters when they're in the mikveh of the wellspring itself? He holds that they're not as good as when they spread out and crawl across the ground and right?
Keep them going.
Yeah. How can it possibly be there's a lower level of reality going on with these waters before they get cut off, before they stop? Yeah. Right? Yeah. How is that? Do you understand the problem here?
It's like you say.
You paying attention?
It's the question if what's first the chicken or the egg.
Okay.
I'm paying attention, but I don't understand it.
Okay, so he's saying a very strange din here. When you have water that's coming from the ground, a well, and it creates sort of a gathering of waters. He's saying that is not purify only when the waters leave that like collection and start to like make like a little trail of water going out. That's called zochalin, which means they're crawling along the water. Nonetheless, if those same waters would go and find themselves into another pit, even when you cut those waters off from their source, he agrees that does purify. So, right? But when it's in the original jar, it doesn't purify. How can he say that when they go out of their source, they purify more than they do inside their source?
The water inside of the mayan is not considered water?
According to Tosafos, it's not considered water, it's considered mayan, and therefore it's not mitaher unless it crawls out.
Or it becomes a mikveh.
But or it becomes a mikveh, right?
So the air is what purifies it, or what purifies it exactly?
No. What are you saying? Air.
What makes it water?
No, I'm saying I'm saying like, what's the difference between if it's in the ground or outside?
According to Tosafos? When you say outside, it's not about, no one's talking about in the underground. We're talking about when it comes out of it springs, but it's collected.
It is collected.
It's collected.
Okay.
Directly from the spring going into like a collection. He's holding that is not mataher. Unless it comes out of its little collection, starts to crawl over, then all like the little river that it makes, that is mataher. And even if that river would go into another pit, and you would make a wall and stop its connection to the original, that's also matahir. So we're saying, how can you say that it's more matahir when it's outside, except disconnected, than it is when it's inside?
When you say it's not mitahir, when it's just only collected but not still spitting over, do you mean it's not mitahir at all, or not on the level of a mayan? Like it's only...
That's a good question. Hold on, let me just continue. Before we get into questions, everyone understand the case? Yeah? You get it? Catching along? Okay. You might not understand it because it's so counterintuitive, but again, just real quick, right? Water is coming out from the ground from a wellspring. It collects into a pool, right? Directly from the spring.
Comes the mikveh.
After this, no, don't talk about mikveh yet. It collects into a pool, right? This pool then like sort of spills over its edges and has a little trail of water which is called zochalim, like crawling water outside. Then that water continues and fills another pool. So far, so good?
And then
Hold on a second, man.
So far, so good.
Then you stop the flow from the crawling waters into the new pool. So the new pool is now independent, not connected to the wellspring anymore.
Second one.
Okay, you with me so far?
Second pool.
What do we do to stop that flow? Like,
We just stop it. We put a wall there. We put some rocks. We stop the water from coming in. It's filled with water, and now we're not letting more water come in.
Well, the second pool, the first pool.
The second pool,
Yeah.
right?
okay.
So according to the Tosafos, it's obvious to him that second pool for sure is mataher. You go in there, it cleans you up like a mikveh. And even the crawling waters that come out of the original one, they're very matahor. That's like water from a mayan. That's even a higher level of purity. But for some reason, he's casting aspersions about the actual purity of the original collection of water from the mayan itself. And then the Rebbe's question is, how in the world? You're going to say that collected water, which is not connected to a mayan, is more purifying than the waters that are collected from the mayan itself? You got it. You understand the case, I'm just saying, right? And the question?
Is the problem with the first pool or with the water before the first pool?
The water in the first pool.
Is
Okay.
it possible to stop a Mayan?
You
The
can,
second pool is going to overflow after a while. It's going to keep on
yeah, you
pushing,
can
pushing,
divert it
pushing.
from coming into this hole, of course.
So it's overflowing. So you cannot stop it. Sorry. Okay, let's go.
Okay, and he says, how can it be? The Rebbe is now asking, how can it be that there's like a diminishing of the water of the mayan, right? Before it gets disconnected, it goes to the second pool, but it's still connected to the ground. And here's the answer. That's why it sounds so crazy, but the Rebbe sort of clarifies because this makes zero sense, essentially, right? So the Rebbe says, what does the Tosafos even mean? What is he talking about? Einam bedin mayim. Ki'im bedin mayan. And so here's how he clarifies. Of course it purifies you. Of course it purifies you when it's coming right out of the water, right out of the ground into the first pool. Why does he say that the waters are not purifying you? Because he doesn't call that water. It's called the mayan. Even though the mayan is actually the wellspring that comes from the ground, but when it comes into this pool and makes a pool of water from the mayan, according to the Tosafos, that is not called water. And we're going to see that it's a really strict thing. It's literally not called water. It doesn't have the name water on it. It has the name mayan on it. And that's what he means when he says it doesn't purify you. The water doesn't purify you because there's no water there. It's a mayan. Right? And therefore, if that's not water, and you need to be purified by water, no one said you could be purified by a mayan. You have to be purified by the waters of mayan. If the case is that you need to be purified by the waters of mayan, you can't go into the mayan itself. So you have to go and wait till the waters crawl along the ground. And according to him, that's what it means to be the highest level of kosher purity for mayan. It's not when you jump into the actual wellspring. It's when you get the waters of the wellspring, which are only called waters when they leave the wellspring.
Retroactively, they become that.
Not retroactively anything, right? It's only when they leave the wellspring, that's when you can say that it has this high level of purity called, according to Tosafos, not everyone holds like this.
The pool itself.
The pool
not
itself
the
does
water.
not purify you because you have to go into the waters of a mayan. And when you go into the original pool, it's not the waters of a mayan, it's a mayan.
But if it's spilling over, it's a Mayan.
If it spills over, then it's waters that come out of a mayan, and that purifies you.
Only the spilling over. You have to
Only the spilling over.
under the waterfall. That's
Only when it leaves the actual pool of the mayan itself and comes out.
The
That
waterfall.
water, if you want to call it a waterfall, it doesn't have to go
Yeah,
down,
I
it
mean,
could
you
go to
have
the
basically
side.
go under it, right? I mean, in it.
Okay, but I mean, it's saying, like, you don't have to purify your body. You can purify a needle, right? The point is, we need purifying waters for all different types of things. It could be water that's less than enough to purify a whole man, right? But that water is called the highest level of purity. But you see, it's such strange. It has to come out. So what's he trying to get to here? He's talking about the idea of "Vayafutzu ma'inosecha chutza." This language is very, very specific. It's when your wellsprings will spread out. If you're in the wellspring itself, you're not where you need to be. Remember we talked about yesterday the necessity of actually spreading the Chassidus. You don't even have the purifying waters unless they come out, according to this opinion, right?
You can't do any
You literally can't. And what did Mashiach tell him? Keshia futsu ma'inosecha chutza. Right? He literally said, like, Mashiach's not going to just come when there's a whole bunch of Chassidus in the world. Mashiach's going to come when this goes literally outside of the Mayan. You got to get it out in order for Mashiach to come.
Otherwise, it's not Chassidus, in fact.
It's not even Chassidus. That's not your Torah, right?
It's not Chassidus.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Does let's say you don't
crazy,
spread it,
yeah,
but
it's
does
deep.
it when you spread it out, it
Yeah.
purifies other Jews. But let's say you just learn in your own Dal Amos, would it still purify you regardless?
Think about it. According to this Tosafos,
No.
you're in a place which does not have the din of purifying
Wow,
waters,
nuts.
right?
Wait, does this apply with any body of water, like a river?
That's
or a
any
sea
Torah?
or
No,
pond?
Mayan.
It's only
It's
a
a Mayan. These are the laws of the Mayan.
There's
Yeah,
something about a mayan that's different.
yeah,
that it's
for sure, for sure.
Wow.
Mayan is the highest din of all purifying waters. What's the proof? You can only get the mei chatas, which is the water you need to mix with the ashes of the red heifer and purify the dead, only from a Mayan. So it has like the Kesser keys for all of purity.
It's like the most natural.
You can do lots of other lower levers of mixing. Well, not according. It depends. Again, this is the Tosafos. He's just explaining the din of the Tosafos to understand the connectivity of the water with the Mayan. Even if the din is you could actually go into the Mayan, which it is. Still, he's explaining the day of the Tosafos why you think you might not, because the water when it's in the Mayan is a Mayan. And by the way, in that sense, when you're spreading the Mayanos Chutza, it means that you're not really dealing with the waters that come out of the Mayan per se. Let's say you can now, where the din is not like the Tosfos, that you can go into the Mayan and be purified right in there, right? So this Tosfos is kind of crazy. All he's really saying is it's not called water, it's called Mayan. But maybe there's a day that the Mayan itself can purify me. Okay, but still, then that water which is inside of the Mayan is not called water. It's called a Mayan. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov is saying. I'm not looking for your water. I'm looking for your Mayan. Right? Now the only question is can I go into the actual Mayan or do I have to send the Mayan out? But it's not, there's two things. There's something called the Mayan, there's something called water. Right? Now, he says, I'll give you another example of this. When it comes of the din of Bikurim. What are Bikurim? First fruits. Right? Your first fruits. From the tree, from the 7 special fruits of Eretz Yisrael, you have to bring to the Beis HaMikdash and give to the Kohen. And he says, we find a very similar thing. This is not only exclusive to a mikveh. The din of Bikurim, einan ela beperus hatlushim. You can't say that there's something called a first fruit when it's still attached to the tree. It's only when you disconnect it from the tree that you can call these the Bikurim. When those fruits are still connected to the tree, they're not called fruits, they're called a field. Right? You don't get to be called by your name unless you are disconnected from your source. It's kind of like the idea that, I'm bringing this, and forgive me Rebbe, if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like the din. You're not allowed to make a hora in the city where your rabbi lives. Right? Like a legal ruling, right? Your rabbi's the rabbi of that city, and you're going to go sit in some place and you're going to start giving rulings. You're not allowed to do that. If you want to give ruling, unless he gives you permission, if you want to give rulings, you got to get out of there. You have to be independent in order to actually give the hashpah that you're intended to desire. So too with the fruit. If you want to give bikurim, it can't be. What could be better? I'll give Hashem the whole tree, right? The first fruits. No, you got to disconnect it, and only then can you call it bikurim. And he goes further and explains this concept a little bit deeper. He says, "B'zeh yuvan das Rambam." Now we're bringing into the Rishonim. He says, according to the Rambam, it's deep stuff. Shemishtachav l'mayan she'enu shalo ein meimav psulim l'nesech. It's a whole interesting thing. He says, if a person, let's just say, bows down, God forbid, in idol worship to a wellspring, but the wellspring is not yours. So you go find your friend's wellspring, and you decide it's a god, and you bow down to it and worship it. Chas v'shalom. Right? According to the Rambam, which is a very interesting, unique din only about a wellspring, you could still use its water to sprinkle on Sukkot for the Nisuch HaMayim. You had no effect on it. Why? Let's see. Wait a second, it gets complicated. After Savrali, the same Rambam holds that nevad afilu shel chaveru asul gavoa. Now hold on a second. You might think it's because you don't own it. No, the Rambam says if you bow down, let's say, to a cow, even though you don't own it, you're not allowed to bring that cow into the Beis HaMikdash, and you can never use it for a sacrifice again. Let's say, God forbid, someone decides there's a cow is a god, his friend's cow. He bows down to the cow. That cow can never go onto the altar.
We're kind of respecting that idol worshiper's action and decision to make the cow holier. The cow is now actually holier, that it can't be sacrificed. Seems like an issue.
No, you can't sacrifice it. You can call it, you and I can sit here and determine the rationale whether God's laws are making sense or not making sense. Maybe you're giving more credence to the idol worship. Whatever you are, you've taken it out of its service to the temple. Whereas, interestingly enough, the wellspring, you have not.
So how does
What's the difference between the cow and the wellspring? Hold on. Now here's, it kind of gets into your question, David. What's the reason why you're not allowed to bring the cow? It's not because you've made this cow an actual idol. You can't take somebody else's stuff and decide that'd be a good trick, right? I'm gonna go take this guy's Ferrari, bow down to it, and he can't use it anymore, right? So the idea is that you can't make somebody else's stuff usher, right? If I decide, that I'm going to put some Easter on your stuff, I can go fifing. I don't have the power. But nonetheless, if the guy bows down to another guy, his friend's cow, he can't go on the altar. How does those two things go together? Because the reason it can't go onto the altar is not because he made it usher, it's because he made it disgusting. It's still mutter. The guy can eat the cow. He can't bring it on the altar though, because find me another cow. This is God's altar, So a guy bowed down to it. I had enough. Just get another one. It's not disqualified because it's usher. It's disqualified because it's disgusting.
It's still kosher.
Not for the temple, but it's still a kosher thing. Shaharei gam ba'asei maisa. Because even if someone who actually got down on his hands and knees, chas v'shalom, and bowed down, any yechol lasur davar she'enu shelo. No one can usher something which is not his own, right? And that goes for more things besides idol worshiper. I can't take something which is not mine and create an Easter for you for it, right? However, b'mei mayan ain't shaykh l'miyisusa. So why doesn't the same law apply for the mayan? If the guy bows down to his friend's wellspring, how come you can bring that on the altar of Hashem?
He's not bowing down to the water.
That's right. There's no water there. Right? That's exactly right. When they're in the mayan, when you bow down to them, right? Lo ayumayim. There was no water there. There was only a mayan. There's no water in existence. There's a mayan in existence. Water doesn't exist yet. And when you're going to go and take them to the altar and grab from them and separate from the mayan, you've just created water. That's a brand new thing that no one ever bowed down to before, and therefore you can offer it on the altar.
So they bow down to the Mayan.
The point where
take the water.
Yeah,
Bow down to the Mayan,
and the Kohen Gadol can come and bring your water on the altar. So what do you see from here? It's a very unique din about a mayan. It's not disconnected from the waters that are in there. It's one. Masha'enki, not so. However, let's just clarify. If, God forbid, a person would bow down to their own mayan, right? Then it is an Isur Gamur, but not because you've made it disgusting, right? Because essentially, you've actually made this thing a prohibited thing. It's like you've turned this into an idol, and therefore, even the mayan, even the water, anything that's going to ever come out of it, because why is it usur? It's not usur just because it's disgusting. It's usur because you actually made this whole entity an isur, right? And therefore, if it was your own mayan, the problem does still exist.
What makes a difference?
But what difference does it make? Because if someone does it, they're still making it a avodah zarah regardless. So what? You suddenly take it and
they're not
suddenly-
making. Here's the difference. Another person does not have the ability to make it a avodah zarah. He doesn't. That's the whole point. He only has the ability to make it gross, literally. Because if something that got bowed down to, it may not actually take on the din of an idol.
But they turned it into a
no.
avodah zarah by
They
doing
can't.
something
They
else.
cannot. You cannot. Which case are you talking about? You cannot turn somebody else's stuff into an idol.
So if I steal
By your
somebody's
bowing
gold,
down
can
to
I
it.
make an idol out of it?
Oh,
You can, however, you can turn your own stuff into an idol, and that's the problem. If it's your own mayan, when you bow down to it, you messed it up because you made it like a piece of Isur, right?
If someone bows down to the ocean, they just ruin the ocean?
No.
That's the whole point. Does the ocean belong to them?
No, Shem. I mean, everything belongs
But
to
the
Hashem
Mayan is
anyway.
not a natural
so-
thing.
My question
Probably
is,
like that.
is it an idol or it has to belong to you?
Are they still guilty of idol worship?
Is the Mayan a natural thing?
How
Belongs to
does
the
something
world?
belong
There's
to
a lot of
anyone?
questions coming in. Right, right.
Hashem, everything
Hold on a
belongs to
second.
Hashem.
I just want to finish up the point.
So then-
How much time do we have left in this class? No time. So let me just finish the point. What's he really getting at? Why are we talking about this Mayan? Turn the page. He says, right, the second paragraph down. Also, adavar hu gam nogei l'Torah Chassidus. How does this connect to Chassidus? Hey, guys, this is big. Listen to this. Me'ikari atanaim ba'fatzas Torah zu. Right? One of the conditions, you say, oh, I got this, Rabbi. You've totally convinced me. I'm going to go spread Chassidus to the whole world. Wait a second. There's a condition. One of the conditions is that you should realize the chibur habilti posek, an absolute undivisible joining im nasiye Torahs hadach, with the actual Mayan. In other words, with the Rebbes. If you're going to go and say, oh, I'm going to take that vort, I'm not such a big chassid of this Rebbe, but I like the idea. What you've just done is you've taken water from a well and you've turned it into water from a mikveh. It might in fact purify somebody, but not at the level of a mayan. If you want it to be at a level of mayan, you have to understand it's joined to its source. Right? So if you're going to take the water from the mayan and recognize your connection to its source, you could take that water as far as you want. It's called zochalin. It's going way outside the mayan, but it still has the din of a mayan. It's still not called water. Right? Only if it's connected to its source. So he says this is how you have to express your chassidus. You have to do it in a way where you're connected to the Rebbeim that gave it. And he says, quote, final words, Lo meru meifitz einu metzias la'atzmu. Someone who learns and spreads Torah, he is not his own independent entity. He is the Rebbe. He's the Rebbe. He's the Mayan itself. This is not you're not looking at water. You're looking at the ability for the Mayan to be Yafutzu Maynasecha Chutza. It's called the Mayan, not called the water comes out of the Mayan. So long as you keep that connection. You can use the Chassidus. The Rebbe is not selfish. You want to take it, disconnect yourself from the Rebbe and teach someone, put him in a mikveh. Nothing wrong with a mikveh. But it doesn't have the purity of a Mayan. And what did we say before about a Mayan and its purity? Its ability to totally overtake someone, even if they're not particularly interested in being overtaken. Remember, the Maimar is the idea of that your midos could stand in the way of regular intelligence, but they can't stand in the way of the power of the secrets of Torah as they are connected to the Mayan. So if you're going to come into the Rebbe's office, something's going to happen over there that has nothing to do with your intelligence. It is going to mamish purify you. And if you're going to go out of the Rebbe's office with a connection to the Rebbe and teach his Torah, you're taking the Rebbe's office into any place in one in this world. And you have that same power. It's as though you are him. Chazak v'baruch.
So Mashiach is going to come and we all become Mashiach.
That's it.
That's really sad.
Damn.
It's like, it's